In 1995, McArthur Wheeler walked into a bank with a gun, waved it at the tellers, and demanded money. The strange part was, McArthur Wheeler wasn't wearing a mask. He wasn't trying to avoid the cameras. In fact, he looked at one and he smiled. Strangely, McArthur seemed to have trouble seeing too. He kept blinking and turning his head. Later he would tell police that he could barely see, and his eyes stung from the lemon juice he had smeared all over his face. The juice which McArthur believed would make his face invisible to cameras. If you were watching Pittsburgh News 25 years ago, or if you're a fan of dumb criminals in general, then you might know where this is going. Someone had told McArthur Wheeler that lemon juice, an ingredient that was once used to write invisible letters, could work against surveillance cameras too. McArthur tested it for himself by smearing his face with juice and taking a selfie with a Polaroid camera. Either the camera or the user malfunctioned because the Polaroid came out blank, confirming that McArthur's disguise was genuine. McArthur robbed not one, but 2 Pittsburgh banks, smeared in lemon citrus. Because he was so confident, so brazen, his surveillance images were up on the 11 o'clock news that night. And before midnight, the police were knocking on his door. Both during his arrest and the ride to the station, McArthur mumbled one sentence over and over. "But I wore the juice." You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no duh on the internet and get us to the juicy facts.
Know thyself was one of the first 3 maxims inscribed in the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. And it was a major theme in the 1999 blockbuster, The Matrix. Know thyself, the Oracle tells Neo. But if knowing yourself is so important, how come so many politicians, entrepreneurs, and successful CEOs seem to have no clue how they appear from the outside? What if I told you we can't know how we appear from the outside? What if I told you we can never know how strangers perceive us, how our loved ones feel about us, how much our boss really likes us? We can never be certain how smart we appear, how beautiful we look, or how confident we really sound. With time and emotional maturity, however, we can come pretty close. By practicing self-perception and striving to see our blind spots. So that's today's subject, self-awareness, and how to identify our blind spots. The spots where strangers might have a better clue about us than us. Myth 1. What is self-awareness? And what if I don't care how other people see me? What if I'm living my best life and judgment doesn't bother me? Myth 2. Okay, so self-awareness might be important, but how much do I need? Isn't it enough that I can see my own potential, my own value at work? Myth 3. Finally, let's get shallow. At least I know what I look like, how attractive I am. After all, we all have mirrors. We're going to get into how coworkers might know us better than we know ourselves. But first, I want to tell Joe how our lemon-faced bank robber inspired the most famous study in science about self-perception.
So we're talking today about self-perception and how much other people can tell about our competency better than us. So my first question, Todd, do you think I could rob a bank competently?
No, you
No,
are not
okay.
a thief. You're the kind of guy that if you had my wallet, it'd come back with more money in it. Me, though, I could definitely do it.
Okay.
and sleep like a baby.
And sleep like a baby. I'm wondering, though, do you think your friends and family would gauge your competency high enough to rob a bank?
No, I don't think. I'm pushing back right away. When I heard that, I don't think my coworkers, my family know me better than I know myself. So you're going to have to convince me.
Okay. Well, that'll be the goal for today, is to convince you that your family knows you better than you do.
I have a strong feeling of self.
Okay.
Strong sense of self, I mean.
Right. So you said after researching this episode, the Dunning Kruger Effect explained a lot for you.
Oh, okay. Let me go over what the Dunning Kruger Effect is.
Please.
It's named after two scientists, Dunning and Kruger, after they heard about our bank robber here, Mrs. McArthur. Now, we all have that grandfather, that stubborn older person in our family who will say something and swear that it's law, that it's bond, and they're way out in left field. They're not even close. But they believe it, Joe, right?
We're talking like Thanksgiving dinner and crazy uncle is espousing something.
Mm-hmm. The know-it-all.
The know-it-all. Okay.
Yeah, raise your hand if someone in your family is a know-it-all or someone at work's a know-it-all.
My great-grandfather used to tell everybody that brown cows produce chocolate milk.
And he believed it.
Yeah, stuck on it. Like he could not stop telling people that.
So what the Dunning-Kruger effect is it's cognitive bias. And this protects us from being naive. It protects us from reality. We feel safe in what we think we know. It makes us feel good internally to not be clueless about something. Now, I've been saying this for years. I have this saying I say, and before I've even read about this. Smart, intelligent people will learn a little tiny bit about something, and they immediately think, I know nothing about this. Simpler people will learn a tiny bit and then act like they've been studying this their whole lives.
I know those people, and I think I work with them.
So during this study, it's very fascinating, the Dunning-Kruger effect. There was a lot of examples. I'm just going to share a few of them. Everyone feels in their heart that they are an awesome driver, that they are above average. Everybody, and all our listeners at home up there raising their hand. I'm a better driver than all these idiots out on the road right now.
Right.
But the thing is, we can't all be.
Yeah, statistically, we can't be above average drivers, all of us.
They did this test for engineers, mechanical engineers in this big company. And over 50% of these engineers thought that they were in the top 5% of the engineers in that company.
It's a block of engineers that can't possibly all be in that section.
Right. And they know math really good engineers, right? What's the likelihood that I am?
Right.
Usually your paycheck tells you where you're at, kind of.
Yeah, paycheck and title.
Now, this part shocked me. I was for sure that this was a man's problem, that this was 90% men. Men are bigger know-it-alls. Joe, it's 100% gender neutral.
Oh, okay. So we can all be know-it-alls.
Now, this works in the opposite, too. So the people who are actually in the top 5%, 2%, the best in the world, they rank themselves at a lot lower level than the rest of the world. Even though they have all the evidence that they're in the top, they still see themselves as lower.
Okay, so do you mind if we put that in layman's terms?
Please.
So you're saying that if you are truly a master at something, you know what you lack, you can identify the things you don't know?
Very well said.
Okay.
Now I get this because we don't want to think of ourselves as vulnerable, not good enough. So we put ourselves up in competency a little bit so we at least can survive. We know enough about this subject so we're not going to get hurt by what we don't know.
Okay. I remember when I got started writing, a writing teacher told me everybody who starts off is overconfident by a lot, but it's necessary because if you knew how bad you were, you would weep and go home.
Also, that makes sense because that's what they're saying. You have to do a certain amount of reps before you know, for a lack of a better word, know that you suck. It takes a while to know that you suck.
Right. Okay.
And I've done this. I'm going to share one with me. I did this in public speaking. when I first started taking Toastmasters and I was doing sales meetings for the companies I work for, found I was good. I was confident. I would get this rush and I would, be peacocking around that I'm a great public speaker. It took me years to realize that I needed some work.
Okay. I went out bank robbing with lemon juice on my face, and it took me a while to realize that I may not know everything about bank robbing.
What about in your writing? Have you been through this yourself in writing?
Yes, I was completely and totally confident of my abilities when I started, and then I got crushing reviews. Like, I got feedback from actual writers, and it was horrifying. But you do need that initial confidence to continue going forward.
And you need that kick in the teeth to
Yes.
start over and get better.
Right. To bring it back to our bank robber, we all need the police to knock on our door and say, hey, you're not as good at this as you think. So we're going to kind of delve a bit into psychology, if you don't mind. Today's subject, self-perception, and we're gonna differentiate it a little bit from an actual psychology theory. There is something called self-perception theory, and it was brought up in the late 1960s by Daryl Bem, and he proposed the notion that you could analyze your own behavior as if you're looking at somebody else, like that video game The Sims, where like you control a little man in a house. So ideally, I might be able to observe my own actions as if I were a third person.
Stepping outside yourself.
Right. So that's effectively self-perception theory in a almost childish nutshell. That's how I understand it. We are not strictly talking about self-perception theory. What we're talking today about is self-perception in how much we can actually recognize our own behavior. Kind of like our bank robber. Are we under the Dunning Kruger Effect? Are we actually as competent as we think we are? And how does that affect our behavior? So, first we'll start with the idea that we don't care what others think. That's kind of gotten really popular online. Like, have you seen like people on Facebook, like especially younger people who are like, you can't judge me, only God can judge me, or I'm my own best advocate, or I don't care what you think, that kind of attitude.
Oh, I know. And the people that put those are the ones that care the most.
That's always what I think. I think that when people are like, I don't care what anyone thinks, I think they deeply care. So this is kind of held up. I went to Psychology Today for this, and it's all about self-perception and something called meta-perceptions. It's the idea that social anxiety is really just the innate response to the threat of exclusion, meaning...
You want to belong. You want to be in the tribe.
Exactly. Even people who think they don't care what others think, they're distancing themselves because they don't want to be excluded at the end. They want to be picked for the kickball team of life.
Now, I've had this happen at sales conferences where I get together with people where we already have the job, and we're together, we're reading our resumes to other coworkers to show that we belong here. Oh, I work for this bank for this long and they're doing the same. It's like, it seemed very immature, but it happens every single time.
Yeah, I think that people do that just when they meet too. Like if you're at a conference and you're all in sales, but even if you're like at an airport, like you start bringing out your resume to strangers to be like, this is me, this is my identity.
You need to like me. I'm one of you.
Right. So we can profess that we don't care, but in the end, even that professing that we don't care is a way of defending ourselves from exclusion. The ability to authentically connect with others, it's entirely dependent on our self-perception. So how many people, do you know anybody like friends and family who are remarkably unaware of themselves?
Oh, very much.
And how do they usually relate to others?
Very poorly. They don't know the appropriate things to say to people of different ages. They don't realize their age, or their communication is poor.
Okay. One of the things I picked up on in this article really rang true to me, and it made me think of that. It made me think of people who are not self-perceptive, how hard it is to have a conversation with them. I'm going to quote directly because this was such a great phrase. It said, "We can never be a fly on the wall of our own personality dissections. We are left to rely on the accuracy of what psychologists call meta-perceptions, the idea we have about others and their ideas about us." So to kind of break that down and parse it out, the way I interpret that, and maybe you can help me on this, I think that means we meet enough people who tell us how competent we are, and then we eventually form a picture. Mm-hmm. So like if one person comes up to you, Todd, and says, "You're a great salesman," that would have some meaning. It would be a good compliment.
No, and your behaviors start to change too, because
right.
You want to fit that mold.
Exactly. And then when 100 people come up to you and they all know sales, or they all know what you're doing, and 100 people say it, then your picture becomes clearer, right? Like it becomes more evident. So generally speaking, that is what I believe that's what they mean when they refer to meta-perceptions. The idea that you yourself can't see who you are and what you are, but many, many, many people coming up to you and telling you, that can actually help you form a perception of yourself.
And they might not just come out and say, "You're a great fisherman," or whatever, but the positive attention they give you, the time they spend with you, how friendly they are to you.
Right.
Your subconscious picks up a lot of this, I'm guessing.
It does, and I'm starting to convince myself that's basically how compliments work. The reason why so many people are compliment driven, where they want to hear that positive feedback, I think that little dopamine spike we get, I think it's because we're getting a plus into our meta-perception. Our picture of ourselves goes up slightly.
Well, I've noticed as I get older, I notice a lot how people look at me when I used to just notice what people said.
Yeah.
And just the way they look in their own skin to me. I really look into their eyes and look into their soul, which it's taken me some years to get there.
Okay. That's kind of... that might be the holistic way of looking at meta-perceptions, to where if you are aging and you're sort of getting wise and getting more confident, and you can look at somebody and say, "I think I see how competent you could be," that might be and then if you give them feedback about it, like mentors, good mentors do that, basically, what you're talking about. So that might actually feed into other people's meta-perceptions. Clearly something our bank robber couldn't do, by the way. If he had gone to at least one other person with lemon juice on his face, they would have called him a madman. So,
bank robber club of dummies.
Right. Now we want to talk a little bit about skewed self-perception. And I'm going to do what I always do, which is bring television into this, because I can't stop weighing all of our psychology against, fictional characters. So there's a boss on the show 30 Rock, Jack Donaghy, and he is horrifically bad at self-perception. Like, that is the shtick of his character, is that he doesn't know how incompetent and jerkish he is.
He misses everything.
Yes, every swing is a whiff. But he's so confident, it's almost like comically charming.
He just walks right across the water.
Right. Same thing with Michael Scott from The Office. He is a doofus, but he doesn't know it, and he's wildly confident about what he's doing.
And he thinks he's hilarious and that everybody loves him.
Exactly.
When he isn't funny and everyone could barely stand him.
Yes. So we oftentimes run into, in the real world, bosses and coworkers who are not self-perceptive. They have not met enough people or taken enough people's feedback and fed it into their own meta-perception, their big picture of themselves. And so they are skewed. They think they're really good at something when they're not. And this is kind of, this is going to be a great example of basically how our own rubric forms. So our awareness is partially based on like what we have value in. Like, for instance, I'm very into writing and creative wordplay. Not everybody likes a good pun. In fact, most people, if you throw out like a pun, they may like sort of get angry at you. It's not a fun, not everybody appreciates it as a joke.
I think you're being a smart ass.
Yeah, a little bit. But if that's what I'm basing sort of like intelligence on in my mind,
cleverness,
right, then I will think that making puns for me is fantastic.
But isn't it fun when you get that person who gets that light in their eyes when you say one and appreciates it?
Yeah, one other person, yeah. So that can happen in not just puns, but like you may value something that no one else values, or that nobody else is gauging as a high mark for you. Like our two bosses here, Jack Donaghy values arrogance and confidence, or Michael Scott values people who are playful or comedic. So they are putting a higher value on things that the people around them don't value. Everybody in the show The Office, they just want to do their work and go home. And everybody in 30 Rock, they want to produce a good show. But these guys, they have their own ideas of what is valuable. So it skews their own self-perception greatly. And of course, our bank robber valued being clever and trying to get money, and that did not work out for him. There was a really good article by Harvard Business Review, and it talked about how self-awareness, the value of self-awareness in business. Do you mind if we cover that a little bit?
Oh, please.
Because I want to put a number on it. I want to I want to figure out what the actual tangible value of self-awareness is and self-perception. So according to Harvard Business Review, they put self-awareness into two categories. Internal self-awareness, which is how clearly we see our own values, passions, aspirations, are fit for our environment, how others are going to react to us. So, for example, if I put you on a completely new team, you've never met anybody, and I'm going to ask you to build a train. None of you have any experience building trains. How well do you think you would do?
Poorly.
Poorly. How well do you think you would do as far as getting along with the rest of the team?
I think I would do good. I feel comfortable with new people.
Okay.
I would take the lead in the social end of it.
Okay, excellent.
Introducing to everybody and find out what their backgrounds are.
So that's a really good example of internal self-awareness. You were able to identify what you wouldn't be able to do, which is build a train, but you were able to identify what you would be good at in the group, which is organization, basically.
Yeah, take the mechanical engineer and make him or her the head of the department.
Right.
Then us stronger people would move the parts,
Yeah, all logical, but that's a good example of internal self-awareness. Whereas if you had been one of our Dunning Kruger candidates where you didn't know your own incompetency, you might have just told me, I don't know how to build a train, but I would start with the wheels. You might have actually started telling me the steps that you would try to build a train in. The other type of self-awareness, so that's internal self-awareness. The other type, according to Harvard Business Review, is extra self-awareness, which is understanding how other people view us. So if I were managing you while you and a team of random people built a train, how do you think I would perceive you?
You mean as far as attitude and work, how it would work? Hopefully you'd see me as one of the top workers. Okay. I think I'm walking into a trap here.
No, I think you're right. I think your extra perception, your extra self-awareness is pretty much on the money. I would see you as a good organizer, and I would see you as a people person.
As at least a plus to the team. At least make the cut. I might not be one of the top people, but...
Right. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the two types of self-awareness. We're not going to get into, they have actually like a scoring chart or a four-quadrant chart to gauge your own self-awareness on. If you want to have fun, I encourage you to check out that article in our links. We will have our sources as usual. Now here comes the fun part, the money part. They followed a study that tracked 467 adult workers across several industries. 99% of them reported working with at least one other person who was successful, intelligent, and qualified, and showed a lack of insight as to how they're coming across. So 99% of their
everybody,
people,
pretty much.
yeah, everybody works with somebody who is not self-aware.
Like every family and every job has it, like we said in the beginning.
Yeah, when we started
at least
this.
one.
Right. I'm going to quote from the article here, just so I get this right. They said, quote, "In our nearly 5-year research program on the subject, we've discovered that although 95 or 99% of people think they're self-aware, only 10 to 15% actually are. Peers were the most frequent offenders, followed by direct reports." So peers, people talking about themselves, meaning direct reports, bosses and clients. Unself-aware colleagues aren't just frustrating, they can cut our team's chances of success in half, according to the research. So when we talk money loss, if a team is working on a project and they fail, it can really often come down to the least self-aware person on the team who skewered it.
Yeah, one person, one bad egg can spoil the whole bunch.
Right. So if it's, you can go onto online and look at their exact percentages for how many people of these groups were reported to be unself-aware, but it roughly worked out to about 1 in 3. So these people that were in this study, about 500 people almost, 1 in 3 of them was, I guess we could use our bank robber, 1 in 3 was wearing the juice, as far as businesses go. So
on all levels, from supervisors on down.
Exactly. So if 1 in 3 people in business are putting juice on their face and expecting to get away with it, what you're actually doing is you're risking every team venture. You're cutting their chances of success in half by wearing the juice, being unself-aware. So when we started our initial research, there actually isn't much data on McArthur Wheeler. So I was wondering, did you have other examples of, let's say, felons or lawbreakers who are remarkably unaware?
I got a good one, or a bad one.
Okay.
His name is Christopher Dunch, Dr. Christopher Dunch. And he was nicknamed by the media as Dr. Death.
So this is going to dark places.
This is. You'll be happy there. Let me tell you about Chris, the doctor. He was a good-looking, smooth-talking ex-college athlete. He was a neurosurgeon. Now, his stats were not so good. He'd operated on 37 people. 33 of them had horrible complications and injuries at his hands.
Wow.
Now, you would think that would make him step back and say, maybe I'm in the wrong field. Maybe I need to do just general medicine and not be a neurosurgeon anymore. But not him. He drove on. He thought that he was the best in the world at what he did.
Well, I say hyper-confident star athlete neurosurgeon with a terrible, terrible record.
Now, he worked in Texas, and there was a real shortage of neurosurgeons, which there is now today too. So he had no problem finding work. So what would happen is he'd go get a job at a hospital, get a huge signing bonus. One hospital got a signing bonus, Joe, of $600,000.
God, okay.
I know. I didn't know they made that much money. I knew they made that much money. I didn't think they gave you that much money when they gave you your parking permit, though.
Right, yeah.
But he was seen as being young, smart, and talented, and he was a very good salesman. But what happened as he started doing these bad surgeries, there's a lot of legal problems when you have bad surgeries. So the hospitals were afraid, get this, they were more afraid of him suing them than they were of him butchering up their patients.
Ugh.
So they would take him aside and say, why don't you resign so it doesn't go on your record? We don't get sued anymore, and you just go out the door. So he just job hopped from one place to another place to another place.
And all these hospitals were just like letting him go because they didn't want to get sued?
Exactly.
Wow.
So no accountability. So there's no investigations ever started. So he kept going around doing this, these Civil War surgeries on people. Now, a couple of his co-workers, other surgeons, other doctors, hated his guts. They worked with him once, and they found him to be a arrogant know-it-all.
Okay. That actually beautifully supports what we're talking about today. The idea that he was remarkably unself-aware, but all his coworkers could see it.
And even though he had these horrible numbers and he's in and out of court, he didn't stop doing it. He didn't think, oh, I'm ruining people's lives. I'm killing people.
Wow.
Most of his coworkers, kind of back on what you're talking about before, refused to work with him.
Okay.
So they worked with him once and said, never again. I don't want to be around this guy.
It's like working in a MASH tent, basically.
Never lost any confidence. He went on and said he was the best at everything, that all these patients, all these other doctors were all wrong.
Wow.
So his last act before he was sentenced, he took all the court cases around, and every single thing that they complained about him that they had already proved in court with witnesses, he wrote in 80 pages disputing, rebutting everything they said.
I am hoping that's not 80 competent, calm words, pages.
Ramblings and rants. I don't know. But the fact that he thought that every single one of the points that they made, that they had proved medically and legally, he thought that they were all wrong. But regardless of what he wanted or what he thought or how great he thought he was, the know-it-all was sentenced to life in prison.
So even the judge was more of a competent judge of his personality. I have a quick question for you, Todd. When you meet somebody for the first time, like you walk up, shake their hand, and talk to them for a couple of minutes, how good of a sense do you get about their competency for things?
I think I can see that just because I've always extrovert and talk to everybody. I can see someone who's pretty smart right away.
Okay. When you spot that potential, do you tell the person you're talking to?
I try to.
Okay.
Almost every time.
That is something I've noticed about you in particular, is when I first met you, you seem to tell people when you recognize competency. And I always admired that. I thought you were complimenting people to like get on their good side. But as I got to know you, I realized you did that almost as like a courtesy, like you're telling people, hey, you're good at this.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true.
Yeah.
So it's not just blowing smoke. If I see something, and to be honest with you, I like people when I first meet them. So I usually look. The reason I like them is because I look for something that I like about them.
Okay.
So that makes it easier.
yeah. That's very admirable, and I think that does. It makes it easier to get to know somebody.
It takes a lot of work, and it's not easy.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna cover a study real quick that kind of backs you up, because as a trait, and also how well you can gauge somebody's competency. So the myth we're dispelling, where we're talking about how much we know our own competency, how confident we can be in our own ability to know ourselves. So this comes from a study from the Journal of Applied Psychology, and it was a meta-study. They were looking at coworkers and friends and how accurately they can assess your ability to work on a job or to complete tasks. This is based on 5 major traits that they looked at throughout. Like I said, it was a meta-study, so they were looking at the data of multiple studies. And they were looking for stability, dependability, friendliness, outgoingness, and curiosity. And they effectively found out that when rating yourself, you can be as low as half as accurate as your coworkers. So for each one of those traits, stability, dependability, friendliness, outgoingness, curiosity, your coworkers are twice as likely to be accurate as you are for yourself.
What?
Yeah. And I'll repeat that key little phrase, as much as twice as accurate. So it doesn't always have to be that much, but it can be as high as 50%. The study also found something else that was pretty interesting. How much do you think your friends know you and your competency?
I think they just know what I tell them.
Okay.
And most of that would be positive, right? Because what do? We go and complain about work and tell them how we're the best ever, and
yes,
we shouldn't have to put up with this shit, and our bosses are morons.
Yeah, if we're complaining, then we're complaining to make ourselves look good. If you had to give a speech about your own body, like I asked you to stand up and give us 7 minutes about you physically, How nervous do you think you would be, and how nervous do your friends think you would be?
I don't think I'd be too nervous. My friends would probably not think I would be nervous. They'd probably think I was pretty confident in anything speaking.
Okay. I ask because I think most people would be nervous, rightly so. Public speaking is like the number one fear of people. But according to this study, it said that usually the people who were asked were able to outperform their friends at predicting how anxious they would look and sound. Meaning the easiest thing to be self-perceptive about is how nervous you'll be doing something.
Because they would think you'd be fine, but deep inside you'd have all your insecurities about, I don't want to screw this up, make a fool out of myself.
Right. We kind of actually know ourselves as far as like our anxieties, basically. After anxieties, however, things get a little bit slippery with our self-perception. So according to the study, when they were given other tasks, like friends or strangers that had just met them about 8 minutes earlier, that's the window of time they gave, they were asked to predict how assertive they would be in a group discussion. So when I asked about, could you build a train with a group of strangers, you were very confident about your ability to organize them, but not to build a train. According to the study, when they were asked to, how assertive would you be in a group, friends and strangers were better able to predict them than they were themselves.
Really?
So
probably by their posture and by their voice tone and...
Yeah, we are actually not that great at predicting our own confidence, apparently, but our anxieties we're good at.
But strangers are.
Right. Strangers can tell how assertive you will be. That makes sense on a human level. I mean, like if I am going to join a tribe of cavemen, like back in the day.
Yeah, we're to go hunting. You see this one guy who looks stronger and faster and
confident. Yeah.
We'll put him out front.
Yeah, everybody turns. They're like, well, Uga is the assertive hunter, so we'll just stand behind him. So we're kind of wired to be able to judge each other's assertiveness.
And Joe and I are both lifelong learners, and we've been in other classes, the after-work classes, and brightness shows up, too, very early.
Absolutely.
It doesn't take 6 months for us to figure out who the bright ones were. It happens in the first class.
I am so glad you said that, because the very next thing they tested in the study was IQ and intelligence. IQ tests and creativity tests. Turns out that friends and coworkers are far more accurate than we are at gauging how we're going to score. So you're on the money. To quote the article, they said, people know themselves best on the traits that are tough to observe and easy to admit, like social anxiety. However, emotional stability is an internal state, so your friends don't see it as vividly as you do. Whereas assertiveness and IQ and creativity tests, other people will know us a little bit better than we know ourselves.
So this is good. So when we go and get advice from friends and strangers, we need to actually follow it.
Yeah, that means when your friends or strangers tell you, hey, you're confident, you're assertive, and you're smart, they actually probably mean it, and it should fit into your bigger picture of yourself.
Or if they're warning you about things because they can see it clearly and you can't.
Yes, I think that's a good way of putting it.
And we think they're just, personally, I take it as them being critical of me, and maybe they're actually trying to help me.
Yeah. My final question for this is, do you think other people are better able to gauge our assertiveness and our intelligence? Do you think we undervalue ourselves or overvalue ourselves?
I would think we overvalue ourselves.
Again, you're on the money. According to this study, they said that people consistently overestimate their intelligence, and they also overestimate their generosity, what they think they donated in a year to worthy causes. And the scientists say that that's probably why people fall victim to the I'm not biased bias. They assume that they are a good observer of themselves, and that's frankly not true, apparently. So we know that we can't gauge our own intelligence particularly well. Can you be very intelligent and still be unself-aware?
Oh boy, yeah. The clueless geniuses. There's always that fictional character, Sherlock Holmes, and he's negative towards women. He's such a jerk, and he has no idea. He's clueless about it, right?
Right.
Zero emotional intelligence, Sherlock Holmes.
Right.
Do you agree with that?
Accurate. Yeah.
Now, but there's also smart people that can have amazing self-perception. Richard Feynman, he gets marked insane by the Army because he's so self-aware. And all he does is answer the questions from the psychiatrist honestly.
Okay.
So I'm going to take up some parts from this book. It's called Surely Your Joke and Mr. Feynman.
Okay. And can we quickly clarify who Feynman was? He was I had to look this up. He worked on the Manhattan Project, and he was like a really famous mathematician. He wrote about physics. He wrote a book called 6 Easy Pieces. So really a stunning mathematician and just a brilliant guy.
Now, this whole interview with him makes me question psychiatrists as a whole.
Okay.
So they start asking questions, and they say, and I'm just going to read through a few of these. Do people like to talk about you? And he answers, yeah, my mom talks about me to her girlfriends all the time, almost every day. And then he says, are people watching you right now? He said, yeah, I was sitting in the lobby with other lads that were waiting to come in here, and because there was nothing else for us to look at, some of them were looking at me.
Okay.
This is my favorite one, Joe. Do you ever talk to yourself? And he says, yes. And of course, we all talk to ourselves sometime, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone talks to themselves.
It's called personal narrative. It's everyone has an inner monologue.
Here's another one. Is anyone in your family in an institution? Now, an institution can be, jail, mental institution, hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, yes, I have a crazy aunt who was in a mental institution.
Okay.
Now, this whole thing reminds me of when I went to a psychiatrist. Okay? And they go in there, and this is what they said to me, Joe. They say, what do you want to talk about today? And this pisses me off, because for $450 an hour...
You think they would have a subject picked out?
Exactly. I want them to take me down the path. I'm the crazy person sitting here.
Right.
Take me and make me better. I don't need a $500 an hour friend, Joe.
Right.
I can't afford a $500 an hour friend.
Yeah, it's an expensive friend.
So what was the conclusion of this study? You talk to yourself. You've got mental illness in the family. People are looking at you right now. You're paranoid, right?
Right.
And his mom's talking about him. So if you ask people questions, we're all crazy.
Right. And so Feynman was so remarkably self-aware, he got labeled insane by the Army and was...
Right. A man who's a genius.
Right.
Who's smarter than all the doctors who are giving him these tests.
That's awesome. So our last myth to dispel is the myth that we know how we look, or that we know how attractive we are. We know from our, we had an episode about romantic obsession, and we also had an episode that we worked on about metrics for dating and attractiveness. I think that is actually the episode, attractiveness. And we found from those studies, by looking into studies about online dating, people generally have a good idea of what their desirability number is, how much people want them. But now we're looking at how much do people, how self-aware are they physically? Can you spot yourself in a lineup? Can you spot yourself in a lineup if I changed you with Photoshop just a tad? Can you spot yourself if I reversed your image on a mirror? So that's the first one we'll talk about. Todd, have you ever noticed Superman's hair part?
No.
It's a bit of a weird question to ask, but something that somebody on I was on crack.com reading humorous articles, and somebody on there mentioned, like their writer was like, hey, have you guys ever noticed that Superman parts his hair on the other side when he becomes Clark Kent?
Oh, that's the big change?
Yeah.
The suit and the hair part?
The glasses come off, and the hair part is on a different side. And down in the comments section, people were arguing. They're like, no, it's always parted one side or the other, or, oh, it's just the costume designers. And I looked into it and found out that's completely intentional, that it makes him look slightly more effeminate, parting the hair on the other side.
Oh, well, I was just thinking of the 80s movies where these young women in high school are not seen as attractive or as nerdy, and then they take their glasses off, let their hair down, and they're a supermodel and they're prom queen.
Right. Yeah, like nobody would have noticed the supermodel in glasses. Yeah. Well, they invented something. Oh, by the way, it's not just Clark Kent, it's everyone. If you reverse somebody's facial image, like if you flip it, it's noticeable. Humans are capable of seeing asymmetry to a remarkably sharp degree. So if you ever look at, they have this as an example of this study. If you look at Abe Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln had a very strange looking face, but if you look at a reverse of his image, it's striking. Like it doesn't look like the right person anymore. Same thing with us. If you have you had the experience where you look at a picture of you and you're like, why do I look off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's because it's flipping the image from what we normally see in a mirror. So when you brush your teeth every day, you look at yourself and you're like, that's me. That's what I actually look like. And then you see a picture of yourself and it's flipped and you're like, that's off. What's wrong? My face looks weird in this. So they actually invented something. A group of scientists were like, how do we look at our real self every day while we're brushing our teeth? What would the effect be? And so they invented something called a true mirror. And I swear to God, you can buy this online, Todd. It is a mirror that has mirror layers so that it flips your image correct. So when you look at the mirror, it shows the real you, the unflipped version.
So how everyone else sees me.
Exactly.
And it's different. That's weird, man.
It's so weird.
It's like those carnival mirror things.
Yeah, except it's the real you. So it's like you're looking into a funhouse mirror, but it's actually how you're seen. So yeah, if you ever want to tweak your brain, look into true mirrors.
I want to know what everyone else is staring at.
That or take selfies every morning like a teenager. You could do that.
As I get older and older, I like pictures of myself less and less.
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate for me too. The sleep bags under my eyes don't get any younger.
Yeah, we're all cute when we're puppies and kittens, but as we get a little older,
Yeah, that's why we need a true mirror. There's another study I want to cover, which is by the University of Chicago and the University of Virginia, Nicholas Epley and Aaron Whitechurch. They did a study to see if we were good at identifying ourselves after we had been modified with Photoshop. They used it to make like a lineup of you. So imagine we're doing the study and we're using Todd as our example. If I took pictures of you, like took a snapshot, and then altered it to look a little bit uglier and a little more attractive in some, and I gave you like, say like 5 pictures or 6 or something, would you be able to pick out the real you?
I don't know. No, probably not.
Probably not. Okay. I like that as we do this podcast, you become less certain about your answers as we go.
The science, not you, it's the science. Okay?
Yeah. Scientists are just out to prove us all wrong. That's it. Well, they did this study. They wanted to find out if people could find the real them among the altered images. And by and large, people were, they tended to look at the more attractively enhanced ones and say, that's the real me. So people were looking at the prettied version and saying, there I am.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we put ourselves up in that bucket. Kind of like the personality stuff where we think we're better than we really are.
Right.
I think we're a little bit better looking than we really are.
Yeah, we look at our Facebook photos and we're like, that good one, that one picture I took of me that looks awesome, that's the real me. The
that's
rest
what
of
I
them,
look like 99% of the time.
Exactly.
These other ones were just bad pictures.
Right. When in reality, the slightly puffy-faced us when we're hunched over eating ice cream in front of the TV, that's actually the reality.
That's the 95%. That one was just unlucky. We fell into some good light.
Right. Yeah, perfect. That's effectively how our brain interprets things. It always wants to pick the best picture of us.
It always rounds up.
Yeah, yes, it does. So they also found that this display, Epley and Whitechurch showed that this bias works for ourselves, but we don't extend it to strangers. So if we are picking out pictures of each other, we pick the normal one.
So then we pick out the ugly pictures of them and say, that's what you look like.
So, yes. So if I was looking at the lineup of Todd's altered images, I would be picking the regular Todd.
Oh, because that's the way you see me. Because you see more of those than that one-off
exactly.
cute one.
Yep. So people tend to say that the attractively enhanced picture is their own, but they tend to believe that the normal one is other people or the average. According to the study, they say that people recognize objects more quickly when those objects match their mental representation. Therefore, if people truly believed that the attractively enhanced picture was their own, they'd find it faster. And that was upheld in the study too. So it's not just wishful thinking. These people really are identifying themselves in the more attractive picture. So when we ask the question, do we know our own attractiveness even when self-perceptions are at play?
So we're focused on our better qualities, on the best pictures of ourselves. And I'm guessing that goes down to our best body parts or our whatever we think is the most attractive part of us.
Right. Just like we talked about the studies about intelligence, that we always assume we're slightly more intelligent than we are. We're slightly better drivers. We're slightly better engineers than the other engineers.
We're slightly better looking, too.
We're slightly better looking, too.
Than we really are. Oh, thanks a lot, Joe.
You're welcome.
I hate this self-awareness stuff. It just makes me feel bad.
Oh, man. It's been a good episode.
Perhaps the maxim, know thyself, may never be fully achievable. But hopefully, by identifying our blind spots, we've taken one step towards self-perception and building a better you. We may say we don't care what others think of us, but science shows that we do. We care a lot. And we depend on combined cues of others about us to form the mosaic picture of ourselves that we operate on. This picture, this self-perception model, will determine our leadership potential, our confidence, and our success rate in group efforts. If you think your coworkers don't know how your personality will affect your job performance, think again. When it comes to stability, dependability, friendliness, cautiousness, and curiosity, your coworkers might be twice as accurate about your future performance. And your friends are more likely to predict your IQ scores better than you if you haven't already taken the test. Finally, it seems we're all a little vain, since on average, we're more likely to recognize beautified versions of ourselves quicker and assign them more importance over our normal plain selves. We may not be as self-deluded as McArthur Wheeler, our lemon squeezy bank robber who inspired the Dunning Kruger Effect, but we all have blind spots. We all have gaps where our self-perception ends and our biases begin. And on some level, we all wore the juice today. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for each of our episodes. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debates.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.
Speaking of opinion, would you like to read another 5-star review?
Yes, iTunes 5-star review.
This is from Lexington 5. Lexington 5 says, super insightful, well-crafted, and trying to look at lots of different things in life at different angles. Definitely worth a listen.
Thanks, Lexington. We appreciate it. Very cool. Very sweet.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for the review. And thanks for everyone who's left us reviews. We will read them all eventually. So.